Traveling to consciousness. We are indeed traveling to consciousness. What do I mean by that? Scalar energy is consciousness. I modeled my career after Tesla and Hieronymus, two scalar energy researchers. So I've developed scalar energy instruments that allow me to control that other dimension. And my ability is to target over 400,000 species of microbes, send that information only, into my quantum field. Look for those signatures of those 400,000 species of pathogens and destroy them in my quantum field, or negate them.
Traveling to consciousness, exploring spiritual journeys to find answers in uncertainty.
And so, now we're live. So, Tom Paladino, thanks for being here, man. I'm excited to talk to you and see what we can uncover.
Much. Let's hope we can cover this incredible emerging science, scalar energy.
Let's do our best, okay? And I think the best place to just start off is, what is this thing that you created, and what's going on, man? What have you experienced?
Yeah, well, traveling to consciousness. We are indeed traveling to consciousness. What do I mean by that? Scalar energy is consciousness. I'm working in the realm of scalar energy. It's non-physical. It's the intelligence of the universe. It is consciousness. Now, why is that important? Well, consciousness controls everything. Consciousness is the master of the universe. So as we move forward and we see that this new realm of if you will, this dimension, this new science, it is just filled with opportunity. It's Tesla energy. Some people might call that chi or prana. What is relevant is this: consciousness is real. It is a type of energy. It is a type of instruction. And once we can tap into that, you're in the driver's seat. And this is what Tesla had such a longing for, to control this type of energy. He called it radiant energy. I call it scalar energy. Some people might call it consciousness. It's the game changer.
Yeah, and so, we have a pretty mindful, a pretty aware community. I think that the science probably portion of this is where we're going to need to be delicate to bring people into it. So just like surface level, if someone's like, what have you done with this energy? Like, what is the device that you have actually created and that you're using? And like, what's the properties of this device? I think that's probably a great place to start. And then we'll unpack the, let's say, chaos that lies beneath it.
That is really one of the keys to my research. I'm working with scalar energy. It's not electricity. I modeled my career after Tesla and Hieronymus, two scalar energy researchers. And I was able to, if you will, over 30 years ago, look at and work with the Hieronymus scalar energy instruments. Hieronymus was an American inventor, one of the few men on the planet to ever develop a scalar energy instrument, or what we might consider a consciousness instrument. So this is the key to my research. This is not theoretical. It's a practical approach. I have scientific instruments that control this spectrum of energy. And when you can control scalar energy, sky's the limit. You're in the driver's seat.
So I guess I feel like we just got to take like one step back. It feels like though you're explaining the concept of what scalar energy is, this mystical consciousness-based energy that is outside of this physical domain of existence. But what is it specifically that you have created, that you're leveraging, and that you're using to, let's say, channel this energy into the physical world?
Yeah, you're right. That's the key. So I've developed scalar energy instruments that allow me to control that other dimension. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I'm no longer bound by the laws of electricity and magnetism. There's a different set of principles, scalar energy principles, which is intelligence. So I leave behind the physical world and I walk into the consciousness of the universe. Now, when I work with these instruments, I'm working with the intelligence of the universe. So I'm transmitting, or if you will, I'm instructing with these instruments. It's not a chemical process. If you want to produce a change in this physical world, it's some type of chemical process. It involves some type of a chemical bond or a chemical process. I work with intelligence, and the intelligence that I work with holds together the chemical bonds. So I avoid the physical world, I avoid the chemical bonds, and I work with the, if you will, consciousness of the universe, the intelligence of the universe. And in so doing, I can instruct matter. I can instruct the seven chakras. I can instruct the emotions. So there is a higher order. And that higher order is not the electromagnetic spectrum, it's the scalar energy spectrum. And the scalar energy spectrum instructs the universe, including electricity and magnetism. So I want to make this very clear to your audience. The initial energy of the universe is scalar energy. The secondary energy, the derivative of scalar, is electricity and magnetism. So we're working today in an electromagnetic environment, so to speak. This is what we observe. But that's the secondary energy, which is imperfect energy. Why not work with the perfect energy, scalar energy, that puts you in the driver's seat, scalar energy that controls everything, including electricity and magnetism? It's scalar energy, consciousness, that is the prime mover in the universe. That's it. It's that simple.
Right, because it seems to me, and I started digging into some physics behind this and the connection between it all, and it seems to be that there is this underlying field that connects, like you're saying, electricity, magnetism, and then even gravity. It seems in your studies, you've mostly been focusing on the electro and magnetive portion of it. Another thing that's interesting to note is the idea of the chemical makeup, right? Everything we do in this physical domain is chemically based, whether it's the food we're ingesting, the way that we spray pesticides on crops, the way that we make bigger crops, the way we apply makeup to our face, the way that we actually propel cars forward is all a chemical reaction. And so, how is this happening, right? Like, and I would love if we could also just kind of step back and look at it from a lens of, the first time that we kind of talked and tried to figure this stuff out, you asked me for a photo. And so, like, why'd you ask me for a photo, and what's going on with that photo?
Okay. So again, to have this underpinning, this understanding, we're not working with electricity. So I'll use my photograph as an example. People will email me a photograph. This is my photograph. My photograph has energy. My photograph has a scalar energy signal. My photograph is my bilocated version.
Is this
So I don't,
is this similar to like aura that they talk about, like your
yes,
aura?
yes, it's the spirit body. It's the aura. It's the quantum field. So there's quantum energy on a photograph. So I never work with people. I work with their bilocated version, which is their photograph. In other words, every photograph that you and I have ever taken represents us in the auric field. Obviously, it's just an energy field, it's non physical. But instead of working with people, I don't want to do that. I would much rather work with a photograph. It's much simpler, easier. And again, I'm working at that higher realm, that scalar energy realm. So we bypass the chemical reaction, and all we do is administer light, energy, through a photograph. The photograph serves as the identification of a person's aura. A photograph identifies my signature of consciousness.
So how, and this is where it kind of gets interesting, and this probably ties into some element of now being the only moment in existence. How is it that a photo taken of me from whenever I was 1 year old, 3 years old, 12 years old is still a representation of me, who I am today?
Yes, you've shown your expertise already. Regardless of when your photograph is taken, it still reports who you are in the present moment. So every photograph that you and I will ever take in our lives only reports one time frame, now, the I am moment. Everything is in the present now. Meaning what? Scalar energy transcends time and space. So scalar energy is always in the present moment. Now, this is very interesting. This leads us again into this new science, this new understanding of reality. There is no time in a scalar energy force field. There's no past, there's no future, there's only the present. So when somebody sends me a photograph, I've worked many times with photographs that are 20 years old, 30 years old. That photograph reports your constitution right now, or at least your auric constitution in the present moment.
Because there's some sort of this like underlying field that kind of ties it all together.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Isn't that fascinating? So we transcend time and space.
Well,
In the
right. And that,
electromagnetic spectrum, we're bound by time and space.
and I guess what gravity is almost that portal into that other realm or dimension of time and space that you're able to transcend it.
Yes, yes. There have been scalar energy scientists who've developed anti-gravity instruments. And the way they overcome gravity is simply by nullifying it with a certain scalar energy force field. So it's scalar energy, scalar light causes gravity. Now, if you can manipulate, you can control scalar energy, you can control gravity. So what does this mean to mankind? Well, shoot, we're heading into an era where we can control gravity.
Which is crazy. Some might say that there's government organizations that already do, but we can cross that bridge a little bit later. I would love to at least kind of still take like a step back, because I feel like we're jumping pretty deep into the physics rabbit hole, which by all
Okay.
means is a very important element to this. And instead, kind of step back, right? Like I give you this photo, and are you able to kind of walk us through some sort of a visualization of what is actually occurring, like just leaving out any of the physics, scalar, electromagnetic, you know gravity, like just leave those all at the wayside. Like what at a visualization level is happening whenever I give you my photo?
So I actually print out a photograph. So I would take a person's photograph, print it out on a piece of paper, and then place it inside an instrument. Place a person's photograph inside a scalar energy instrument. Now, when I do that, the photograph of the person allows me, if you will, to access their quantum field. And there are a number of functions that I can appeal to and conduct on a person's quantum field. For instance, I have a standardized session in which I can take a person's photograph, ascertain their 7 chakras, and balance them. Because chakras are composed of scalar energy, they're non physical. So, one of our programs, one of our protocols is taking a person's photograph, balancing their 7 chakras with this energy, balancing their brain waves. As a result, people feel better. They have this sense of an emotional uplift. Many people say that they no longer are depressed or that their sleeping habits have improved. They can achieve a meaningful night of sleep without interruption. Now, all of that calls to mind that we're working on the conscious and subconscious level. It's information.
Yeah, it's something that's very fascinating, right? Is that it is this information field, and for a how do I want to articulate it? The idea that I've always kind of been presented with is the Akashic records. I'm not sure how
Yes.
much. Yeah, is that
Yes.
is that the same field that we're pulling energy from?
Precisely. So some people have a notion, theorize that there is an Akashic record. That's a recording of all information, all activity in the universe. Yes, I call that the mind of God. Some people might call that consciousness. But in order to have a well organized universe, you have to have perfect communication, and that communication must be instantaneous and continuous. Now, what type of communication can you have in the universe to maintain order? It has to be instantaneous, perfect communication, which is consciousness, which is scalar energy.
It's interesting, right? Because where my mind's kind of going with this is in a visualization route. I'm sure in the actual fabric of the way the universe works, it probably doesn't look like what I'm about to explain, but as humans, we need some sort of visual tool. So if it's a conscious energy, the information field, which I believe they're starting to actually prove exists within every organism and item, is there's an information field. But sidestepping that, we all can agree that at some level we are conscious. There's far different levels to that for everyone. Some people are a lot more conscious than others. I think we all can agree at that. But it visually seems to me that there might be like a tube or a highway that's connecting my physical body to the Akashic records. So I feel like that connection exists automatically within each of us. Now, where your device comes in, would it be that you're almost strengthening that tube or connection between the Akashic, the mind of God, and our human physical form?
Yes, I think my instrument will accentuate that. So let me make this very clear to the audience. God has given everybody a mind and a heart, emotions. I believe now, speaking in a biological sense, the human mind, the brain, and the heart are two vessels of scalar energy. And how can I prove that? Well, the mind is capable of thought, which is scalar energy. Thinking, creativity is really consciousness. And the heart, emotions, feelings, well, that likewise are scalar energy emanations or scalar energy waveforms. So this should not be esoteric anymore. Everybody is a scalar energy being. Everybody has a mind and a heart. Everybody controls scalar energy. And I want the audience really to dive deep into this. Why do we think? How do we have creativity? How can we perform some type of mathematical computation? How do we study language? All of this is information intelligence. It's scalar intelligence. Without scalar intelligence, we could not think. Without scalar intelligence, we would not have a heartbeat. We would not have emotions. We would not be human. We would be robots. So really what distinguishes people and animals is that they're sensate. Why are they sensate? How is it that they receive this information? How is it possible that we can think? It's much more than a biochemical. The biochemical processes in our brain are the end result. What is the impetus that allows us to think or to create or to compose music? That impetus is consciousness.
Because it all starts there. And I mean, that's something I've even learned on my meditative journey and in my practices, whether I'm trying to do something that's really difficult and it sucks in the moment, but then after I do it, it seems like there's this rush of enlightenment feels like the wrong word, but this higher energy that is now coming through me. And whether it's my physical body kind of training or tuning to this new frequency, I guess is really the question that kind of underlies all of that. And I suppose that's almost where you're this almost portal, if you will, into connecting ourselves
Yes.
into this God energy more deeply
Yes.
comes into play.
Yes, I have a portal into that other realm. Now, the human mind and our feelings, that is another portal. I have a mechanical portal. I have an instrument that allows us to access this other dimension. You frequently hear of this term, a portal, entryway, stargate, call it what you will. For lack of better terms, we'll use those terms. What's the point? You have two options. You're either working in the electromagnetic dimension or the scalar energy dimension. When I work with my instrument, I leave the electromagnetic dimension and I have a wormhole or a portal into the other dimension, which is scalar energy. I prefer to work in the scalar energy dimension. I can work with 500,000 people a day by way of their photograph in the scalar dimension. Today in my laboratory, by way of collages, today I was working with 500,000 people around the world, sending quantum energy to their aura, non-physical, balancing the chakras of 500,000 people in the world. Imagine that potential. I mean that, literally. I'm not exaggerating. I've been doing this quite some time. I have 500,000 people under my care right now.
That might make you the most, well, I don't know how you would articulate that. You probably have the most patience. Yeah. I don't think anyone would have that amount of patience on the entire world. You might have the most patience.
You're right.
I'm
not being condescending. You're absolutely right. You understand what God has given me. What a responsibility this is.
Right. And there's a lot of questions I have based on the idea of responsibility, especially when it comes to something like this. And maybe that's kind of where we pivot at this point. I saw and before we go even deeper, I do want to kind of play devil's advocate on this, because, in doing my research, I was kind of looking up scalar energy, and there's not a lot of information out there whatsoever. There is some really good information, and then it seems like the other information wants to denounce specifically your work, which I find fascinating, as a scam, as a fraud, as, the next thing. And in, taking my unbiased as I possibly could be to look at what their points were, it didn't seem like they had much of a point. It was more of just like labeling you with, and I don't want to, if you've seen these things, I don't want to take you back to
you can tell the audience.
Yeah, they basically just use name calling. That was really the only tactic that they were using. And, I couldn't really figure out much of the info. Like they weren't giving much information. It was more just name calling, for lack of a better phrase of it. And so the only thing that I saw that was like a very valid remark was the idea of no scientific research. And I'll let you speak on this, because I know you have one case study of, an entire tribe who was cured of HIV. But
Yes.
I mean, couple that, I'd love to hear that story. But also, have you kind of explored the route of bringing in unbiased testing or scientific researchers as well?
I welcome any third party. Now, if that third party does materialize, they have to work independent of me to conclude independently of my work whether this is valid or not. So in order for this really to put this under the microscope, so to speak, a disinterested party must step forward, and this disinterested party must conduct their clinical trial or their studies without any influence from me. Okay. So with that in mind, that's not happened. Number two, if any
Real quick, why do you think that hasn't happened yet?
my research is suppressed.
Okay.
If what I am saying is true and accurate, this is a threat to the powers that be.
Okay, and this is probably, I ran the calculations on this, right? If everything that we have discussed up to this point is true, we're talking about the manipulation of gravity, electricity, and and magnetism. And so if you look at all the industries that touches, right, it's transportation, it's healthcare and beauty, it's medical, it's, communication, it totals like a whopping 100 to 150 trillion dollar industries that this would overthrow.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. Bravo. And I concur with you. Scalar energy in many ways does away with, negates the necessity of taking certain types of drugs. Scalar energy will be used for anti-gravity. Scalar energy will replace our cell phone with a much superior system. Scalar energy will be used as a telecommunication system. It will be used to educate ourselves. We'll eventually be able to use this energy to download information into our mind. So it'll change education, health, transportation, as you said. It's in the beginning of this nascent state. And I concur, this is a multi-trillion-dollar industry. Scalar energy someday will supersede the computer industry.
Well, and that's what's interesting too, is, what's coming to mind, no pun intended, is Elon Musk is working on kind of like Neuralink, which is to plug our mind into computers. But if you're able to do that just at a quantum level from the scalar level, that gets all wiped away. That's not important. That's irrelevant.
It's obsolete. You're absolutely right. Artificial intelligence still takes human programming. If we can tap the Akashic record, the mind of God, which is infinite intelligence, infinite wisdom, you don't need a supercomputer. I have a supercomputer in my laboratory. It connects me to that Akashic record, to consciousness. And what I can do with my scalar energy instrument far exceeds the ability of any supercomputer.
And speaking of that ability, this was something else I was trying to think of, if this would be possible, is, do you know if this is something that, because maybe we'll take a step back first, right? I think before I get down into this, like, is this possible rabbit hole, let's stick a little bit more with the concrete of what we actually do have. And I would love for you to touch on, I believe, I don't think I saw it on the website, but I do believe you have a case study of like a tribe in maybe it was Africa or the Middle East who was
Yes.
completely cleared of HIV.
Yes, we have a number of studies. For instance, we've been working with groups of people, villages in Tanzania. And these people come forward, and we're working with non-government organizations, and we work with them by way of their photograph, usually a collage from Tanzania, HIV clinics. And after we work with them, the people report, this is very important, the people report that they feel better. The people report that their appetite improves, that they can go about, they're no longer sluggish, that they have a sense of vibrancy, if you will. And if they have a follow-up PCR test, the PCR test is not detectable. There's no detectable viral load. Now, this has happened thousands of times with us. We've worked with thousands of people who are HIV positive. After a scalar energy session, people will go and have a subsequent follow-up PCR test. Those tests are not detectable. So I allow your audience to muse and to cogitate on that, and to say to themselves, well, is this of merit? Is this true and accurate?
Well, and then on top of that, all right, because I guess you've been using my photo. I'm not exactly sure what you've been doing with it, but hopefully good things. Um,
I,
but I'm curious. I'm curious, maybe like the different application that you would use my photo versus someone with HIV. Because me not having HIV, is there something else you put in the machine or calibrate it, or again,
exactly.
is this just God's energy just saying, "Hey, we know what they need"?
The instrument has to be instructed. Now, in this case, I'm going to hold up a photograph of, say, the herpes virus. I actually take photographs because a photograph is a source of light. And I place inside the instrument thousands of photographs of different microbes. This is one photograph of herpes. And the information from herpes downloads, if you will, into my photograph. So, what am I saying? There's a communication between a photograph of herpes and my photograph in the quantum field. And this information enters into my quantum field. It'll identify the herpes body, the herpes virus in my quantum field. And within that body of knowledge, it will break it apart or negate it or nullify it. This is scalar energy. It's not an electromagnetic event. This is not a biological process. It's a non-physical informational process. So to answer your question, every day I target over 400,000 species of microbes. And my ability is to target over 400,000 species of microbes, send that information only, into my quantum field, look for those signatures of those 400,000 species of pathogens and destroy them in my quantum field or negate them.
So how
That's informational.
Well, so then this is really interesting. You're putting in your photo in with the photo of, let's say, a deadly maybe not deadly in this
Yes.
case, but a harmful pathogen.
Yes.
How does the information or the machine know to not give you more of this as opposed to taking it away?
Very good. So, very good. The instrument is calibrated as a reverse phase. The instrument is calibrated to break apart, to negate the molecular bonds. So I have instruments that are designed to rid us of contaminants or microbes by negating molecular bonds. And then I have in-phase instruments that will create a molecular bond. I am only sending the intelligence of the molecular bond, either to negate a molecular bond or to form a molecular bond. If there's any physical process after that, it's almost matter of fact. It's a consequence of my behavior. So I work in the non-physical, and the non-physical, I believe, breaks apart pathogen or a microbe, if you will, or a toxin, or creates an antioxidant or a vitamin.
Right, because that was something I might have heard it on another podcast, but you were saying that you could, if someone's like vitamin C deficient or vitamin D deficient, you can then put that into the machine with a picture of themselves. And then I guess you would just, let's say, for lack of a better term, flip a switch, and now it knows, oh, put these things together.
Yes. Yes. By consciousness, by intelligence. So this is far beyond me. Let's be quite blunt. Any virus has 1 million, 2 million base pairs, that hydrogen bonds that hold together the genome. And I'm saying that a scalar energy instrument will negate the hydrogen bonds, causing what? Causing the genomic material, the DNA or RNA of a virus, to fragment. Well, I can't dictate the activity of 1 million base pairs, but consciousness can. And consciousness can negate 1 million, 2 million, a billion base pairs. And when you do that, that genomic form breaks down. And this is what I think, this is in theory what I believe happens.
This is because this right here is where it gets super fascinating for me. So have you, and for like a part of me, this kind of probably also comes back to the responsibility aspect of what we were discussing. Have you ever tried or experimented with bringing physical things into somebody's current reality? For example, putting my photo in there with a bunch of money, or my photo in there with a certain car, or my photo in there even with another specific person, let's say something that would be so improbable. I don't want to say it like that, I guess, but just let's say, like a certain person coming into my life, right? Whether it's, and this might be where it definitely touches on morality issues, would be another person. So maybe we can get to that point, but what about just something material like money or a car or a house? Have you experimented with something like that?
I don't, and I won't. I consider this God's gift, and I really don't want to over commercialize this. So I don't treat for money or material possessions. Now, I will say the chakra balancing, which is God's handiwork, it's not mine, should put us in the frame of mind to be successful, to be productive. Do I treat for money? No. I don't. I would almost call it that would almost besmirch this technology. I would not want to do that. This is God's intelligence, and I want God to provide for our needs. I don't want to go that route.
Gotcha. No, I mean, and it makes total sense, because I think that like, even as I was kind of going down that line of thinking, it's like, okay, money, maybe it's not quote unquote that bad, but you go far enough and it's like, hey, this specific A-list celebrity, I want to be in a relationship with them. It seems to me like you could very well override what is called in the spiritual world soul contracts of, actually forcing, not for, I guess it's forcing, right? Forcing two people to be in a relationship together even.
Right. And I would concur. Once we understand just how vast this power is, then we're going to realize that this really is controlled dominion over nature. I come from a Christian background. And if you read in the book of Genesis, when God gave Adam and Eve dominion over nature, that was a scalar energy gift. Adam and Eve possessed scalar light, scalar energy. They lost it, but they initially had dominion over nature. So what are we doing? We're going back to the Garden of Eden, in which we will have dominion over nature.
I always find it interesting. Yeah, I always find biblical references interesting to certain topics whenever they arise. So then with the, let me think of where I was trying to go with this. I don't know where I was trying to go with this. We talked about that. Well, something that comes up then, right, is if it, like, in the way that you're even kind of like putting this out there, right? God's gift to earth. It's your calling to help illuminate and align and get people in their alignment and healed. Then I'm curious on top of that, then where, this kind of comes back to that morality and balance question. I saw on your website that you do have programs and you sell certain programs and, 3-month and 12-month, treatments. How does that balance out? Like, why not just give this treatment away for free to anybody who wants to send you a picture?
Excellent point. So in order to pay my bills, I have to have a retail site. I have to pay as I go. The greater majority of the people that we work with, it's pro bono. It's for free because they can't afford it. What I envision, once I introduce this to the world and the world gets it, I just want to work on donations. My goal, one of my goals is bluntly to treat 1 billion people a year. Okay. Now, I realize a lot of people don't have money. We're still very fortunate in North America. We have jobs, we have money, we have careers. So many people around the world cannot afford sessions. So, for instance, the people in Tanzania, I've worked with millions of people in Africa. It's all pro bono.
I love that. I love that. And then, I mean, here's the interesting thing that I'm actually even kind of putting together as we were even just talking about like the A-list celebrities and, this interesting dynamic of aligning people. Does this kind of play into the shadow aspect of what seems to be, and I don't want to get into like a conspiracy rabbit hole here but I do believe that are some elements to it. Whenever Tesla passed away, all of his documents were kind of taken. This is something that entered the human consciousness almost 150 years ago in the late 1800s, early 1900s. So do you believe that there are elements or people who have this technology hidden away somewhere and they're using it, like I don't want to call it like a shadow, some sort of, let's say, shadow energetic, because I want to stay away from the buzzwords, because I don't want to pin this on a specific group, but let's just say people in the dark that are using this to manipulate the masses to become or stay in control or power.
Yes. Yes, to answer your question, yes. Let's revisit Tesla's work. Back in 1899, Tesla developed a tower in Colorado Springs, which was a free energy tower. He demonstrated free energy in 1899. Whatever happened to his research? He was extracting free energy from the stars. Whatever happened to that free energy device? It's too intimidating. Like you and I have agreed, this is a multi-trillion-dollar industry about to be born. And the status quo does not like competition. Tesla would have made obsolete so many industries.
Well, yeah, and in my research, that was a huge reason people pulled out of funding, is there's no way to actually monetize. If you would have created the Tesla Tower, there would have been no way to physically monetize it. And they said, what was the famous quote by Westinghouse? It was, if I can't put a meter on it, then I don't want it. No. And I mean, I get that from a scarcity and a money perspective. So from that perspective, and I think this would even help us out scientifically speaking. Have you thought about given any energy towards or had any inkling of a way to actually measure the amount of scalar energy that someone's body is taking in? And then, because then you'd be able to compare that, side by side of when it's turned on versus off.
Now, great question. And my terse answer is no. It's impossible to measure this. Now, why? Scalar energy is infinite. Consciousness is infinite. Is there a basic unit for consciousness? No. Is there a basic unit for the Akashic record? No. Everything in this world, whether it's a mile, a kilometer, etc., is a basic unit. It's a finite measurement. So with scalar, everything's infinite. There's no basic unit. So you will not be able to ever to measure this energy. You'll be able to feel it. You'll be able to see the before and after results. But is there ever going to be a way to measure infinite energy? Not that I know of.
Well, but and then to maybe just kind of flush this out there as I'm thinking of it, if it is this baseline, scalar energy is this baseline energy that inhabits electromagnetism, electricity, magnetism, and gravity. Would those frequencies not be manipulated or changed around a certain person? Yes. Once it's on or off? So would it be possible to measure the difference in, I guess the electromagnetic waves surrounding a person when this is on versus off?
Yes, it would. For instance, anytime I have my cell phone close to my instrument in my laboratory, my cell phone cannot function because my cell phone only recognizes an electromagnetic signal. If I place my cell phone close to the instrument, it simply will stop functioning. Meaning what? Scalar energy overrides that. There's a man by the name of Grebennikov who created an anti-gravity platform. And he wanted to photograph himself while he was on this anti-gravity platform. His camera wouldn't work because his camera did not recognize scalar energy instructions. So we've seen that in the vicinity of a strong scalar energy force field, it negates electricity and magnetism. My cell phone is negated close to my scalar energy instrument, meaning what? Gone are the deleterious effects of electromagnetic pollution, and instead you have the pure energy, the life force energy that, if you will replace that harmful effect. Meaning, translating that, if everybody had a scalar energy session, in some way this would serve to demagnetize them, would serve to correct their conscious, would serve to correct their biofield, probably their biofield.
Which is wild, right? And I mean, even more so, could you expand this out and actually use it on a certain area? Like if you were to just put in a picture of your house into the one of these machines, would it be able to harmonize the entire, your property, let's say all of your property that is in that picture?
I've seen that. My predecessor Hieronymus saw that, in which Hieronymus would take an aerial photograph of, say, a farm field, and he would provide nutrients for the crops in the soil, and that entire area would be under some type of influence, of scalar energy influence, to the point that that particular area no longer experienced violent thunderstorms. The weather was much more clement within that area.
Jeez, is that well documented?
It was documented as far as his research, but it's never been peer reviewed because nobody has a scalar energy instrument. The only way you can prove or disprove my work or the work of Hieronymus is if you have the same ability. Well, who has our instruments? Nobody. I inherited my instruments from Hieronymus in many ways. And really quickly, this is why some people who question my results, well, you can question all you want, but until you have a scalar energy instrument, you're not versed, you're ignorant how this energy is working, so you really cannot comment.
And I feel like that's probably going to be the bedrock, right? I mean, and I feel like the majority, and I'm kind of tapping into my, my ex-scientist self, which is, the burden, what I would say would be like the burden of proof is on you to prove that it's working.
Correct.
But then we kind of hit a stalemate here where it seems in your mind, it's like, you don't really care to prove to anyone, that it works. So, you don't have this like drive to prove anything about it.
Exactly. Precisely. Thank you. I've seen this. Hieronymus saw this, my predecessor. I've witnessed this energy for 30 years. After receiving thousands of testimonies on our website from people around the world, I know what this instrument is capable of. Do I want to go the regular route of approval through government oversight and legal oversight? No.
Well, I think you got to be careful there. I think you got to be real careful.
Big business can't even define scalar energy. It misses the point. It's like, okay, if you want to define what I'm doing, define the term. Do you have any experience with this? No, they don't.
Well, so where my mind goes, and this was something I actually had written down, is speaking of suppressed technology, we've seen time and time again when people who create engines that can run on water, for some reason, end up dying, whether it's in a freak accident or suicide or any of these things. So this brings up two questions for you. Number one, have you ever gone the patent pending route, or I guess the patent route, or thought about it, or have you got any mystical downloads, I guess, in those regards? And number two, to get on record, you're not a depressed individual, right? And have no means of suicide.
No. I don't seek a patent. It's not necessary. Dr. Hieronymus had a patent. The patent has expired. The instrument works. Would I trust this with a government office? No. Many governments are corrupt. Am I happy? Yes. God protects me. The precious blood of Jesus protects me. Nobody can harm me. I just move forward. Nobody intimidates me.
That's beautiful. And I mean, on top of that then, right, where, like, I don't want you to disclose where the the machines are, but are they at least in some way protected that if,
3 laboratories.
You have 3. So they're scattered. It's not in like one central location.
Yeah. And God has promised me his protection, not only for my person, but for these instruments. This healing ministry It's God's doing. It's not my doing. And as long as I keep this on that level, that spiritual level, and I do not chase money and I do not chase fame, then God will always honor me because I'm honoring Him. That's the key. You cannot use God's energy and draw reference to yourself. You always have to draw reference to God, who gave us the energy. And when you do that, you're in alignment and you're under God's grace. When you start to usurp his rightful position, then you're no longer going to enjoy God's wisdom or His protection.
I'm really interested now in the answer to this next question, because this is a question I've pondered a lot, and I'd love to see how your answer, if it aligns with my question or answer that I've arrived at, which is, if this information has been downloaded to you to, get this higher level energy that we both, I think, believe has been and know from Tesla that it's been around for over 150 years. There's likely other people that have been using this technology on Earth. Why is it then, right? And I'm drawing this parallel between you and maybe some people who have created water power engines or people who have created water from air. These engines, which once they kind of go the patent route or whatever they do end up unfortunately dying. Why is it that God would, let's say, give people that information of, here's scalar energy, or here's how you turn water into a fuel efficient motor? Why is it that they would end up being, let's say, offed, and you don't believe that would happen to you? Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I don't think I'm besides the laws of nature. I simply think I'm in God's good grace. Why is it that so many people have perished when they're trying to bring forth this new and a promising technology? Well, it's obvious. The powers that be do not want mankind to be liberated. They want to control us. Do I foresee friction in the future? Is this going to be political dynamite? I'm sure it is. I think we're really just at the tipping point now, because you can't keep this under wraps any longer. Will God continue to protect me? Yes. Do I see the problems that Tesla had? Yeah, to be quite frank, I believe demonic forces stood in the way of Tesla. But God is continually trying to give us His light, His divine essence, scalar energy. And sooner or later, somebody somehow is going to introduce this to mankind. And if it's me, so be it. So I am undeterred. I see the mistakes of the past and the pitfalls of the past. And with that in mind, this is one of the reasons I don't want to align myself with government or big business, because Tesla tried to do that and he was undermined. The long story short, Tesla should never have trusted government, big business, the media, because they undermined his work.
Well, and it seems like the issue for him was, though, that he ran into the problem of not having money. He was unable to commercialize it to make money off of it, which, I heard some people in high regards, they regard Edison as like, okay, well, he at least was able to monetize his inventions. Meanwhile, Tesla, which I always find super fascinating, never really was able to turn that pivot of monetizing the things that he created.
You're absolutely right. And I think Tesla was more of the humanitarian. He really wasn't interested in money. What Tesla lacked was really a good business manager and a promotion team. But people didn't understand what he was doing. They still don't.
Yeah.
So, that put him at a disadvantage. Whereas Edison had more of a business structure, I believe. Tesla wasn't interested in that.
It's interesting because now it's making me think about, let's say, the way that I have viewed money in my upbringing, right? Like in my mind, my podcast, like the core of me, the absolute core of me just wants to show people a new way of thinking, bring new ideas to the forefront to help them see the world in a new way. And I think it's very similar to what you bring to this podcast. And where it gets interesting, though, is then the element of, well, you still need money to support yourself. You still need money to operate in this 3-dimensional world. And it feels as though there is some sort of friction between my old self, because I think I've gotten to a much more healed place, but my old self, and I think people who tend to have more of this humanitarian mindset. So this leads me to a couple questions. I mean, the first one being, you know, do you have any foresight into why that might be? But even more so, and maybe this is actually a better question for my line of thinking, could you put in your machine money, but with a way that it heals the collective consciousness or view of the energy of money?
I would say that the chakra balancing is doing that automatically. In other words, you don't need to actually insert a $20 bill in the instrument, because the $20 bill is just the extension of greed. Why not just work on the mindset, the consciousness, the seven chakras, the brain waves, and balance that and put things into proper perspective? Money is simply a tool. And if we can instill that in people, including government that prints our money, then we have a much better economy. By the way, one of the reasons why we have so many economic difficulties, is because we don't control our money supply. That's another conversation.
I was going to say, I wanted to make a quick correction. You said the government prints our money, which the Federal Reserve, not a part of the government, but yeah, I think you noticed that. Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah. That's a whole nother conversation, all in its own regards. Let me see here. I wrote down like some keywords I wanted to bring up, but honestly, this is weird. I feel like we got through pretty much all of them. Is there any this is wow. I'm actually kind of surprised how quick we kind of got through a majority of the questions that I had.
I'll titillate the audience with some work of mine in Hieronymus. My predecessor, Galen Hieronymus, achieved a U.S., Canadian, and a British patent for this instrument. At one time, he was well received by the U.S. government. Hieronymus was working with NASA. Hieronymus secured 3 photographs of the Apollo 11 astronauts. While the astronauts were orbiting the moon, Hieronymus was working on their photographs, and he was able to detect their biorhythms on the photograph. And he wrote up a report and he presented it to NASA. Well, at that time, he was working hand in hand with NASA, and they were enthralled. They really were interested in his work. And they saw the merit of this. They saw that this was non-local communication. The FDA was working with Hieronymus, my predecessor at time. Hieronymus was also working with the United States Army. And the Army had an experiment. They wanted Galen Hieronymus to take an aerial photograph and find on that aerial photograph through a scalar energy instrument where soldiers were hiding, or where tanks and equipment were hiding. And Hieronymus was able to take a stylus, if you will, and pinpoint that stylus on the aerial map. And everywhere he touched the stylus, he could tell you where soldiers were, or where a tank was, or where a jeep was located. Through a map, an aerial map of a mock battlefield with the scalar energy instrument, he was able to use this to identify, to locate people and equipment. Now, imagine what that would have meant to the Army today had they followed up on this. But I don't think they had the foresight, frankly. I don't know why. It was maybe this is back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And many people have never heard that name, Galen Hieronymus. He's perhaps is just a footnote in scientific history. He could someday win the Nobel Prize for his discoveries, because there's just earth-shattering what he discovered. I followed up on his work. Every time I read about what he accomplished, it offers mankind just a sea change in the way we're living. Scale energy will improve our way of life. Sadly, it's just a footnote in history.
Yeah, I don't think I've heard of him before until you brought him up. How do you spell his name?
Hieronymus, Hieronymus. Galen Hieronymus was one of the country's first radio engineers, brilliant electrical engineer, and then he discovered during his career that there was another energy, scalar energy. He called it alloptic energy. And all of that proves that, if you have this understanding of electricity, that you can eventually apply what you learn with electrical engineering to the scalar energy sciences.
So
Well,
what is your background? Did you go to school for electrical engineering, or was this something you just kind of came across?
I studied physics, and I always wanted to study physics with the intent of following up with Tesla's work. So I have a basic background in physics, but there was a time in my life, in my 30s, that I said, I'm not going to study conventional science anymore. And I began my understudy with scalar energy sciences, scalar energy as my main focus. And it's all been groundbreaking research for the past 30 years. And that's what it takes. Why do I say that? When you discover something, nature gives up her secrets begrudgingly. What I've discovered is taking me years because I had to rewrite a textbook. I'm writing the scalar energy physics textbook, and it takes time. Discovery takes time. I'm elated when I make these discoveries, but nature gives up its secrets very, very cautiously.
Yeah, let's jump into the actual maybe physics of it. I've gone through computer engineer, so I've done electrical engineering, have probably basics in a physics understanding. And I remember seeing a video that I was watching, and they were talking about, I believe, gauge transformation, where there's actually a piece of the equation, and I think it was like Lorenzo theorem, and then there was another theorem associated with it, where they essentially took a piece of it and just kind of threw it out. They were like, all right, we're just going to take this math and just equate it to zero or equate it back to itself so that we can get it to cancel out so that we get the information that we want. Is that something that you've experienced in your research here?
No, and I'll tell you why. Any theory in electromagnetic theory or science does not apply to scalar. You're dealing with two energies that really don't have that much in common. Scalar energy, for instance, I always say this: it's a phi spiral. It's a double helix. Now, I've never seen an electrical current that twists, that looks like a corkscrew. That's what scalar energy is. Even my predecessor, Galen Hieronymus, said that scalar energy moves like a corkscrew. His wife told me that. And what a profound thought. Because if you put an electrical current on an oscilloscope, there's no corkscrew. There's no third dimension. You just see the rise and fall. You see an oscillation.
Right.
This is a pulsation. So scalar energy is a pulsation of this double helix, this rotating double helix.
So is
It's a
it so is
different dimension.
the two images that I'm kind of getting in my mind, and this might help with imagery, is number one, the double helix of like a DNA strand, and then the
Yes.
other one would be of like the classical health symbol where you have kind of the staff and then two snakes
Yes.
kind of curling up it.
Yes. So if you look at a scalar wave, there's a major and a minor groove. The major groove, this is where the phi principle comes in. The major groove is 1.618 times the length of the minor groove. So if the minor groove is 1, the major groove is 1.618, which is phi. That's the ratio of phi. And then you compare a scalar wave to DNA. DNA has the phi incorporated into it. There's a minor groove in our human DNA, which could be represented as 1, the value of 1. And if you look at the length of the major groove of our DNA, it's 1.618, which
Mm.
is phi. So it's always been my belief that a scalar wave creates DNA, which is a miniature, if you will, scalar wave.
That's wild. Because I also know that if you die of old age, they basically say that your DNA is no longer able to like replicate itself anymore. It made an error in the replication, and this is probably just one way of passing away, of course. But that's like the idea of dying of old age, is that your DNA can no longer replicate itself. So then through these scalar functions, it would be having an effect on the DNA itself that's going through your body.
You're right. And I believe I've been working with scalar energy now for 30 years in practice. I believe it has extended my life. I believe that this is the pathway, if you will, to longevity.
Well,
This
and
is what
so this is interesting because I actually heard you talking on shout out to Christina Rice onto her channel, and she even asked you about, I think, this concept of living forever, in which you kind of pointed out, right? And if anyone's listening, look at this in like terms of energy, right? You have put your photo into this machine and it's working its scalar energy only on you. However, you're operating in a three-dimensional plane of existence where there are all these different energies coming in, and the scalar can only do so much to negate it. And I believe you said that if you were in a perfectly scalar environment, you would never age, which is a fascinating concept because it also kind of ties into the power of now. So what prevents you then in this situation from being in a completely harmonious scalar wave? Like, in my mind, if you just put in a picture of your house, of your laboratories, of you, your family, your pets, anything that you come into contact with, would this not create that perfect unified scalar environment?
it would, but it's attenuated. That's the problem. My instruments are not strong enough. I'll give the audience a corollary to that. Grebennikov, who I admire, he did develop a scalar energy anti-gravity platform. When Grebennikov would fly on this platform, he was in a really strong scalar energy force field. And he noticed that while he was aloft, flying about on this anti-gravity platform, he had a wristwatch. His wristwatch never advanced.
Mm.
But when he came back and he set the platform down, and he would realize that time had advanced 2 hours, but his wristwatch was always behind 2 hours. So apparently, when he was in this very strong scalar energy force field, time did not advance. He was either immortal or close to being immortal because he was not subject to the passage of time.
And this is where it starts to get weird, because what we're talking about here is his manipulation of gravity. And Einstein even proved, I believe it was Einstein, correct me if I'm wrong, who proved that there is a correlation between time and gravity. And he did this by flying a clock around on a space, or on a some sort of plane or spaceship that was outside of like the gravity of Earth, in a sense. Maybe it wasn't outside. I'm probably muddying this up. But then when he compared that clock to the one he had on the ground, the times were completely different.
Yes. Yes. So we see that scalar energy is the cause of gravity. Scalar energy is the cause of time. So the gravity and time are the effect, are the consequence. And how do we control gravity and time? With scalar energy.
So have you been able to affect gravity and time through your research at this point?
Not yet, but I think God will give me the wisdom for an anti-gravity instrument. It should be rather straightforward. What I'm working on in the immediate 5 years is to learn how to illuminate a building. I want to be able to illuminate a building at a distance with scalar energy. And if I can do that, if I can transfer this energy, so to speak, and light up objects within the next 5 or 6 years, that should be a great benefit to mankind. And if so, then I can move on to anti-gravity.
And now, whenever you say light up, are you saying like the walls of it would just light up, or are you actually tapping into the electrical components that are illuminating the lights in that building?
Just without any electricity, without calling upon the electromagnetic spectrum, to illuminate something with scalar energy. I want to be able to illuminate objects with scalar energy, not electricity. And if I can show that free energy from the sun and the stars can be used at a distance, non-local, and illuminate objects, well, that's part of the equation to solving our energy crisis. If you can illuminate a house with scalar energy, you don't need the power company.
Oh, don't tell them that.
Yeah.
But so this is actually a really fascinating concept, right? There's a lot to unpack here. The first one being, I know biologically speaking, how great the sun is for our bodies, right? We're talking about UV, UVA, UVB, all those UV raises. And I'm sure there's a whole bunch of different things and energies that kind of go into that we're, adapted to. So whenever you're saying illuminate, is there a way that you're kind of pulling the sun into the, let's say, walls of the room around you that is
Thank you.
creating this essence of vibrance?
It's exactly. My instruments are miniature stars. My instruments are miniature suns. Now, what do I mean by that? It's free energy, it's clean, it's wireless. We don't depend upon electricity. It's this other dimension. And it's life enhancing. So this is the key. I want to develop a very powerful scalar energy instrument that will be a miniature star that could send energy anywhere in the world and illuminate buildings, objects. If I can do that, then I can prove to the world that scalar energy should be used in power generation for illumination, And then after that, then we have to do away with the motor. I'm not happy with motors because it's still a mechanical device. I want to use scalar energy as an anti-gravity device. Grebennikov had no moving parts on his anti-gravity instrument. He simply was able to negate gravity. So what am I getting at? The animating force, the kinetic energy of the sun and the stars. You don't need a motor to once again create kinetic energy or an armature or a turbine. You get away from the piston, you get away from turbines. The action is always the sun and the stars, scalar energy. Now you just have to download or apply that energy to the function that you want to achieve. Really, scalar energy will obviate the need for a motor or a turbine. You don't need motors.
So this is kind of calling up a question that I've been thinking about a lot. And, like in this motorized world that we're speaking of, so many, if not everything, runs on motors, from electricity to, your car, all this stuff. And in my mind, right, the motor is almost something that we've just taken for granted. We need a motor to capture electricity, to transform, to move it. And the parallel that I'm seeing here, this is going to be a little bit of a flashback. During Christmas, I was on vacation with my family, and my brother, he's a rocket engineer, so he's working at one of the top. I don't want to drop the company name at this point, hopefully to get him on the future, but one of the top, rocket companies in existence. And something that he had said is with regards to quantum physics, which is, as we kind of look deeper into quantum physics, everything starts getting more confusing. But the world that we've been living in, everything should make more sense the deeper we look into quantum physics. And the thing that he's always pointed out is that there's something wrong. There's something wrong about our perception with when we look at quantum physics that we're not understanding. And so he says, in his words, where we're either not supposed to understand or there's something fundamentally wrong with the way we look at quantum physics. How does this relate then? It feels like there's a bridge here with scalar energy. Where do you see that bridge between the way we're viewing quantum physics and scalar energy today?
Now, your brother is prudent. Whatever we learned about electricity and magnetism is much of that is true and valid for the electromagnetic spectrum. This is a different energy. You cannot look at scalar energy and think that it has voltage or amperage. It does not. So you have to relearn. This is why I spent 30 years in private study. I had to relearn what I learned in college and apply it in a different sense. So, quantum energy, scalar energy, is a new textbook. And this is what is so intimidating to some people, including physicists. When I tell them that you're going to start at ground zero because this is not electromagnetic, and this is a new science, some are okay with that. And some some physicists don't want to hear that. They don't want to have to study anew. Well, this is a new science, and there's no way around it. You have to start in first grade. Sorry, that's the way it is.
You just kind of just ripped me apart there, because I've been thinking about this a lot. There was an Instagram reel or something that I saw where it was talking about how, people climb to the top of a mountain, and yet they then see that there's another mountain that's taller and another higher peak that they want to get to. However, to get to that higher peak, it means that they might have to climb back down the mountain to climb up this other one. And I've seen it in my life with, being a software engineer and getting to the top of the software engineer pinnacle, and then seeing, maybe not the top per se, but getting high enough where I can see the top. And I'm like, wait, I see there's another higher top over there, and which required me to quit my job, start this podcast, and now start at the bottom of this new mountain as a podcast, a podcast host, content creator, all that stuff. And so that fear, I feel like that is the exact same fear that I came face to face with of, well, yeah, you had this great run of this old physics had a great run, but if you want to transcend and get to this higher place of being, of enlightenment for mankind, of new source of energy and material, we got to start at the bottom of this new mountain to get to a higher top.
You're absolutely right. And this is what Tesla understood. And this is the one glaring drawback that Einstein, he never could surmount. Einstein never considered another energy. Apparently he called scalar energy spooky action. Well, there's nothing spooky about it if you understand it. You see, you can't fit, if scalar energy is an apple and electricity is an orange, there's two distinct species. And this is what we have to do with scalar energy. You cannot compare it to electricity. You cannot use your understanding of electromagnetic theory and apply it to scalar. It doesn't apply.
So then to kind of weave this back into the question that I had regarding that, that dialogue I had with my brother, where did we kind of, I hate to say go the wrong way, but we went down the path. What is like the kernel of the path we went down that led us to quantum physics as being our deepest fundamental of truth, as opposed to have, like, where did we go left when we should have gone right to get down to scalar physics being this like higher peak or this higher mountain?
We should have listened to Tesla. He's the most advanced scalar energy quantum researcher that I know. Why? He had scalar energy instruments. So at the end of the day, you have to back up your theories in practice. I have theories. Can I back them up? Yes. I have practical instruments that control this energy, and I can show a repeated outcome. I can repeat the process. So I'm working under the laws of science. Tesla had scalar energy instruments. This is the key now. Very few researchers have ever perfected a scalar energy instrument. I could rattle off Tesla, Grebennikov, Kozyrev, Hieronymus, a few others, Moray. There's less than 10 researchers that ever developed instruments. So if you want to become an expert in scalar energy, sooner or later you need a scalar energy instrument, and you need to learn from that instrument.
So then what, and I'm trying to think of this from like a mechanical perspective, because I understand like electrical, for electrical energy, right? You need a battery, you need a wire, you need a resistor, there's voltage, there's current, there's an inductor, there's resistance. But what are like the fundamental mechanical items that you would use in order to tap into to the power of God, for instance?
What Hieronymus developed, and remember, he was an electrical engineer, the ability to take AC current and convert it into scalar, or like vice versa, take scalar and degrade it to AC current. And this is the pro forma that I find very valuable. I take an ordinary household AC electricity, convert it into scalar. And then after I broadcast it, invariably that scalar energy will degrade in this world back to AC, back to what I would call electromagnetic energy.
So what's popping into my mind, and I have no idea if this is related at all, but would this be related to the Tesla coil then?
Yeah, yes. I use Tesla coils. Yeah.
Okay.
And one of the things that's so advantageous when you're working with scalar energy in a coil is what? It will beget the double helix. It allows for the formation of the double helix. So when you think about scalar, I also use a vacuum tube, because the vacuum tube incorporates a third dimension. So the vacuum tube, this is a vacuum tube, it has a third dimension, height, width, and length. And if I'm using a coil, it has height, width, and length. So when you're working with Tesla instrumentation or scalar instrumentation, you have to recreate a sun. You have to incorporate the principles that govern us, the sun or a star. And that's what I'm doing. I have a miniature star. As opposed to solid state electronics, microprocessors do not recreate a universe. A vacuum tube and a Tesla coil recreate a universe.
Can you say that last sentence again to just make sure I heard you correctly?
A vacuum tube has 3 dimensions. A Tesla coil has 3 dimensions. And if you will, they're like a miniature universe confined within that dimension, within that structure. As opposed to solid state electronics, a microprocessor that's man-made, that cannot necessarily incorporate the 3rd dimension or the 5th dimension, if you will. Meaning what? When you have a scalar energy instrument, you have to find your way into the geometry of the universe. That geometry automatically affords itself if you have a vacuum tube, because there's no human interpretation. A vacuum tube collects nature. A Tesla coil collects nature, whereas a microprocessor is man's interpretation of nature. So you have to go back to instrumentation that works hand in hand with nature. You're only amplifying nature. You're not creating a new nature. You're not trying to override nature. Whereas many microprocessors, many CPU units, etc., are not you're not copying nature. You're trying to create your own paradigm. It doesn't work that way. There's limits.
Right. Where this is an interesting pulp culture reference. I'm not sure. Are you familiar with Rick and Morty at all? The cartoon?
No.
It's basically it's a grandpa and his grandson, and he's like a mad scientist, and his grandson isn't the most intelligent kid in the world. So they kind of like balance each other out. And he has a flying car. And at one episode, he has the battery. You see that he has a battery that powers this flying car. And this battery, he calls it the microverse battery. And it's literally a universe inside of a battery. And all the people of this universe, he like just waited until they like had life form. And then he decided to introduce them to this, what did he call it? Like some sort of step stool. So they were like just stepping, kind of like one of those, exercise devices where you're kind of just stepping up and down. And he would extract that energy out in order to use it for his car. And so like it had this whole hilarious dynamic involved with it. But is that like, I'm not sure really even where I'm trying to go with this. Like it's kind of also bringing in this dynamic of quote unquote playing God, right? And I guess that's where this is that fine line that you're trying to dance with of, how much of this do I actually, use? Where's the morality in it? So like, and then what really sparked me about this was you talking about you're actually creating a universe inside this vacuum with this Tesla coil. Is it down to that level? Is it down to that level that you're creating stars in this tube that could have inhabitable planets that have people running around in it? Or am I getting a little out there?
I'm trying to copy nature. And when you can copy a star, that's what I have, a miniature star, then you have star-like capabilities. So I don't want, there's no way I can ever outdo God by the creation of a star. So I'm trying to copy a star. That's what a scalar energy instrument is. This is what Tesla devised in Colorado Springs. He was able to illuminate light bulbs at a significant distance with scalar energy without wires. So this copper dome that he had in Colorado Springs, that copper dome captured radiant energy, scalar energy, and he was able then to use this in a non-local capacity and broadcast that energy and illuminate objects. So Tesla had a miniature star. I have a miniature star. The key is to mimic, to copy nature. Don't go against nature. You're not going to win. Copy nature.
So then on top of that, and I think there's probably an interesting conversation here in terms of abundance and scarcity. The way that I've always kind of viewed, and this kind of goes back to our rudimentary view of physics as it is right now, which is in order to power something, you need to take energy from somewhere else. So like you
Correct.
take energy, you got to input it somewhere else. You want to create electricity, you need to burn coal or, do a certain thing depending on what you're doing. Nuclear fusion, same way. So whenever you're quote unquote, what it sounds like to me is taking energy from the divine field that is God, it it makes me think that you got to be pulling it from somewhere into this dimension. But is it more that it's just that's infinite energy that we're acting upon?
It is infinite energy. I'll give the audience an indication. Apparently, in Buffalo, New York, Tesla took out a combustion engine out of a car and he retrofitted it with a scalar energy motor. And all that Tesla needed to do was to extract radiant energy, scalar energy that would power the motor of this car. And the car would operate on sun power, on star power. So he had a car, was not a combustion engine. The engine was replaced by scalar energy, and the motive force was not combustion of fuel, but rather the sun.
Mm.
Now, he demonstrated it, and apparently the car maneuvered quite eloquently. The point being, the motion, if you have an armature that creates motion, or a turbine, or a piston, gone are the armatures, gone are the pistons. The motive force, the kinetic force, is the sun. If you want a power plant, it's the sun.
Right. And when you're saying this, is he actually harnessing the energy of our sun that's sitting in the middle of our solar system, or did you recreate your own sun that's sitting inside the engine?
I always work with the sun and the stars. I cannot recreate the sun and the stars. Why would we want to? It's the perfect energy source.
Well, then, real quick, but you said that you created a star, right? Like these are stars.
I can harness the sun. Let's just put it that way. So my
Okay.
instrument cannot create scalar energy, but can harness scalar energy.
Mm.
So it's not a point of origin of scalar energy. It's a capacitor of scalar energy.
It's a intermediary, right?
Yes.
Right. It's not like you're creating the electricity. You're harnessing it in a certain way. Gotcha.
I harness scalar energy. And this is what Tesla did. And what more could you want? Again, the perfect power plant is not a nuclear power plant. The perfect power plant is a star. Why not? It's clean. It's infinite energy. You can access it anywhere. You can access it at the North Pole. Why not use the sun? This is what Tesla saw. This is what I see. Gone are fossil fuels. Gone, no hard feelings, are wind turbines, hydrothermal plants. You don't need that.
I told you, man, this covers about $100 trillion. I think about 100 to 150 trillion dollar industries that are going to get toppled.
I've shared my research with some people, and they realize that if we can start working with 1 billion people a year, just the healthcare savings alone should be $500 billion, $1 trillion in savings a year.
What about, and this probably goes against free will in some way, shape, or form, but why not just, scan Facebook, take all the images that you see and just throw them into your machine?
I don't want to do that. I'll tell you why. Because it's meaningless and I don't have people's permission. I get that. What do I want to do? Slowly educate people. This is not easy to digest. This is a new science. And sadly, I'm one of the few pioneers alive today. I wish Tesla and Hieronymus were around. They're not. So it's almost a solitary path of mine, not by choice. So how does one man, me, introduce this to 8 billion people? Well, by podcast. And thank you for this opportunity. Big media does not want to promote my story. Even though I can help billions of people with scalar energy, quantum health, I'm receiving no help from big media.
Have you tried reaching out to them?
Oh, sure.
What's the common response you get?
But you can't prove it. No, we're not interested. There's always a gatekeeper.
Sure.
So the people that I'm approaching, it's not their ultimate decision. It's the gatekeeper behind them. Those decisions are made in Paris and London and in Tokyo and in New York. They're not made at the local level.
So if we get back to, because this is where it gets interesting, right? Is if you're able to manipulate gravity, you can manipulate time in theory.
Yeah.
So, I mean, have you, man, because this is where it gets weird, right? With like time theory, and if you go back in time, and change the course of history in a certain way that, certain things never occur. Like, I mean, if you were presented with that type of information, I would assume one of your first things to do would to be good to go back in time and talk to like Nikola Tesla or, any of these great names that you're talking about. So how do you see or view these paradoxical questions that arise with time and going back in time and how it affects, this present moment and all of that jazz?
I don't know if God will ever give me the ability to go back in time. If he did, then I could warn people about the future and educate them about the future. Hieronymus, my predecessor, he had a very strong instrument. The instrument used to levitate, and he did not want to come close to the instrument when it was on because he noticed that a time warp, a time dimension was opening up. So Hieronymus just used this instrument at a distance. It did levitate, but the problem was immediately that if he got too close to it, he did not know if he would enter into a time dimension and go to another period of time in history. So these are some of the things that have to be overcome with scalar energy. How do we use this energy and not enter into another time warp?
Right. And maybe we can somehow like bridge this into like the joining of consciousness, right? And through the research I've done with extraterrestrials and anyone who uses spacecrafts to move across the universe in a blink of an eye, it appears to me that there's some sort of connection that they have with their mind or consciousness and the physical machine itself,
Yeah.
that they are able to just think about a location and be there, almost like remote
Yeah.
viewers. So have you gotten any sort of inclination of how you could even work consciously with the devices you're using now and like attach your consciousness to them?
Yes. Yes. I believe many times when I'm working in my laboratory, I've seen my instrument behave according to my disposition. So my thoughts affect the outcome of that instrument. And I always try and pray when I'm working with this instrument. So, yes, I would agree with you. And to speak to that point, can we teleport at the speed of thought? Yes. Why? You're in a scalar energy environment when you teleport. You're non-physical, and you're out. There is no speed limit of 186,000 miles per second, which is the speed of light in the
Right.
electromagnetic spectrum. You're working in non-physical reality in which you can move about at the speed of thought. Quite profound. And you put all of that together, is that possible? Yes. We can move around at the speed of thought in and only in a scalar energy environment. There is a limit to the electromagnetic environment, which once again begs the question, okay, why are we working with limited energy with limited potential? Why not just go to scalar? This is why Tesla abandoned AC electricity. If you look very closely at his career, after his discoveries in Colorado Springs in 1899, he did not produce any electrical instruments of any noteworthy advance. The latter part of his life was almost exclusively devoted to scalar energy. Now, a lot of people say, well, those are electromagnetic devices. No, they were wireless scalar energy devices. He gave up on AC electricity, apparently. That's the
Interesting.
way I look at his career. But you really have to understand, anytime he would say wireless transmission or radiant energy, those are the two phrases that clue you in. That's scalar energy.
Right.
What, he, for AC electricity, he needed wires. Anytime he speaks of wireless communication later in his life or radiant energy, that's an indication he meant scalar.
Are you aware of what that pivot was, or if there was an event or some sort of thought he had that pivoted him away from AC into scalar energy?
I understand from what I've read, he placed two magnets close by in a scalar in an electrical field, and those two magnets in an electrical field side by side seem to negate the electrical current, changing it into the double helix. And when he observed that, he said it was a release of incredible potential energy. Potential energy. He was right. Now, I have no idea the schematics he was using, but this is the way it was described. And at least I read that. So he realized you could take a very strong electrical current, nullify the current by placing two magnets side by side. And the result, the conversion, is from AC electricity to scalar. Brilliant mind. He developed many scalar energy instruments.
I was going to say, and then because that kind of would have started to show him the connection between electric and magnetic energy.
Yes.
And then somewhere, did he ever get into the gravitational aspects of the energy or no?
I don't know. It's hard to say. I think he was involved in the Philadelphia experiment. From what I've read and this is from what I've gleaned from history, he may have had his hand in the Philadelphia experiment.
I'm not familiar with what that was.
Or at least his expertise, in which there was a Navy ship. Apparently, there were two very powerful Tesla coils placed on this Navy ship, and the ship teleported from Philadelphia to Roanoke in an instant.
Nobody followed
the Philadelphia experiment.
Nobody followed up on that?
Well, they just couldn't believe it happened at that time. But there were signs that was a scalar energy event.
So this is super fascinating, right? Do you, is there, and this is kind of something with spirituality, right? It's almost as if our human minds, whether it's the world that we're born into or whatever, we almost find it so impossible to think of things that we deem impossible. We're unable to actually open up our mind to things that we have been told are inaccurate for so long. And to even have, because now that you were explaining it, did kind of click with me. I remember the Tesla coils on a ship that teleported, but I didn't really remember too many things about it. That's so wild to me that there's actually this physical experiment of teleportation, the physical world teleporting to another physical location. And yet the general public was kind of just like, this is almost too impossible for us to believe and to carry on with. So I don't know if there's really a question there, but is this this feels like a similar phenomenon to the energy that you are likely pushing up against when introducing this to new people.
Yeah, it's a new chapter in physics, and what we've studied in college, God bless, does not apply here. And this is why, by painstaking research, it's taken me 30 years to ascertain and to arrive at these conclusions. It's been tough. For instance, at the conclusion of the Philadelphia experiment, some of the sailors on the ship interpenetrated into the hull of the ship.
Oh.
So during this very powerful scalar energy force field, the ship and the sailors were non-physical. This is how you experience scalar energy when it's a very powerful force field. And apparently the sailors said that they could walk through the hull of the ship. At the conclusion of the experiment, if you were passing through the hull of the ship, when the ship went from a non-physical state, scalar state, back to a physical state in the electromagnetic spectrum, some of the sailors were fused into the ship. Meaning what? Meaning that the non-local, spirit-like, non-physical action had ceased, and the sailors were then embedded inside the ship permanently.
So that brings up an interesting point then. It's almost as if there might be something, I'm trying to think of this from a human psyche perspective. There might be something in our psyche that we at some core level understand that this is real, this exists, but it is so grand and beyond our conscious awareness that we want to even dive in it. We won't even touch it because it's I mean, it's godlike, right? It's this, it,
It is God.
it's this energy that if we actually could control it, the things we could control would almost put us in this state of just like unbelievable power that might be just it's like it's too grand for us to comprehend, right? Like I can even imagine, I'm trying to picture myself standing there, this happens, sailors are embedded in the ship. There's a part of me that would want to push it away and say, guys, we got to stop fucking around with this. We need to stop messing around with, this energy of God that we've discovered because of how dangerous and powerful it is.
Yeah. Yeah. There are some theories that the experiment went awry because they weren't pulsing the scalar energy. It was more an oscillating current. It should have been more of a pulsation. Well, on and off instead of an oscillation. Whatever went awry, it went awry. And to have the sailors embedded in the hull of this ship, it shows that it's a very powerful energy. You have to use this appropriately. And that experiment failed and failed miserably.
Well, I mean, I'm going to push you back on that. It depends how you describe failed. I mean, you transported a ship across, time and space, but yeah, in terms of
They
human
should have done
life.
it without this.
Yeah.
Because it's an experiment. You don't experiment with human life.
Yeah, that's definitely well, tell it to our government.
Apparently they wanted the government wanted to conduct this Philadelphia experiment to make the ship invisible. Now, during the experiment, the ship, it's called the Eldridge, the USS Eldridge, had a green halo around it. It was surrounded by this corona of green color. And I go back to Colorado Springs when Tesla was experimenting, and at his tower in Colorado Springs, the butterflies in the vicinity of his tower had a green corona, a halo around them. So apparently, when you develop a very powerful scalar energy force field, the human eye can see some type of green corona, a crown of green around objects, butterflies in Colorado Springs, and the green halo around the ship in Philadelphia. And right at that moment, the ship disappeared and it was teleported. So not only was it teleported, but when you're in a scalar energy environment, many times it becomes invisible to the human eye, and you cannot detect it by way of radar, which makes sense because radar can only detect an object in an electromagnetic force field. If the ship is in a scalar energy force field, you cannot use an electromagnetic radar to detect something in a scalar energy force field. Just as my cell phone, as an electromagnetic device, cannot function in a scalar energy force field.
And for terminology's sakes, like, we're electromagnetic beings, right? Like, this physical reality is an electromagnetic reality that we're experiencing. Just confirming, just based on
in this world where it's predominantly electromagnetic energy,
because our heart produces electromagnetic field, right?
It does, but then it's not my theory that the intelligence for the circadian rhythm is scalar energy. Why do we have a heartbeat? It's intelligence.
It's pulling that in from that force field into this reality, which gives this reality the quote unquote meaning, let's say, that we have. So do you think that this is, and I'm trying to think back to, a lot of research that I've done into mostly stone moving, like with the pyramids, with all these ancient technologies of moving these, Stonehenge, Easter Island, moving these grandiose structures miles and miles and miles. Do you think that this is the lost technology that they had access to that we are just coming back to understanding?
Yes. And some of those monuments are demonic. So that's my belief. So there's a lot of technology that can be utilized by the angelic realm. So in other words, many of these pyramids, even today, we could not reproduce these pyramids. So I think there was a demonic influence on many of these structures, including some of the pyramids.
What do you mean by that? I haven't heard of this before.
There are good angels and fallen angels. I believe the fallen angels have created built some of these pyramids. If you really take a close inventory of all the pyramids in the world, there's hundreds, thousands of pyramids. And to this day, we don't have the technology to duplicate that. So I believe this is really a demonic influence. Only a demonic influence could have accomplished that.
Well, I'm kind of
3,000-4,000 years ago.
Well, I'm kind of confused now, right? But I thought you were saying that scalar energy is what could have been used to create these things. Like, where does that? Do you think?
I believe angels. I believe an angel is composed of scalar energy. I believe an angel has control over that dimension. Okay, I'm from a Christian background, so if an angel can control scalar energy, then they can manipulate it. And you could do what you want. You have dominion over nature. I mean that quite literally. I believe Adam and Eve had dominion over nature. I believe angels still have dominion over nature. Even fallen angels can manipulate scalar energy.
So then I guess the point that I'm confused on is like, where did it turn demonic? The fact that angels used it on the physical reality?
It's always God's gift, but you can use God's gift inappropriately.
So then what about creating a pyramid is inappropriate use of it?
Well, if you're going to create a pyramid, it still, in many ways, is a capacitor of scalar energy. It will collect scalar energy. I'm speaking about even, for instance, the pyramid of Cheops. Man did not build that. It's too complicated. I believe only that angelic power was necessary to build the pyramid of Cheops. And frankly, I don't see what I would consider the hallmark of wholesomeness and virtue there. So I think there's a demonic influence in many pyramids, including the pyramids of Cheops.
I'm not familiar with that one. I'm going to pull a picture up real quick.
It's outside of Cairo. Some of these pyramids, see, if you look at them, they're not only massive structures, but they're scalar energy instruments. They harness scalar energy. Well, even today, that's a poorly understood topic. How could a pyramid that controls scalar energy, how could we have constructed a pyramid 3, 4, 5,000 years ago? We didn't have that technology.
Right. I guess
it's hidden technology.
Right. I guess so the Great Pyramid. Is that the Pyramid of Cheops that you're saying?
Yeah, the Great Pyramid.
Oh, okay.
Today, with all of our architecture, it's my contention we could not even build that pyramid. Much of that had to be built by either anti-gravity or, just the precision in building that pyramid.
Yeah, I've never.
So we don't have that technology to build it. How was that pyramid built? It was built by scalar energy.
Yeah, I've never heard anyone call it Cheops before. That's a first for me. But yeah, but I guess I'm still, and I'm all on board. I'm all on board with this idea of, this energy that we're speaking of building these pyramids. But I'm still kind of interested in you elaborating on where that demonic essence comes in. I've heard about how
the energy is pure. It's from God, but energy can be used for good or evil.
It's based on intention.
Yes, thank you. And this is why Tesla never wanted to release his secrets. Tesla apparently took many of his secrets of scalar energy to the grave with him. Hieronymus begrudgingly gave up much of his information. I met his wife. I never met him. And she schooled me in this. And over the course of 4 or 5 years of understudy, she would teach me, tell me things. She told me how she and her husband could hybridize a plant using energy. They could cross 2 genomic forms using energy. And I was just fascinated what they had accomplished. But, it's such power. It has to be used prudently.
So I'm all on board with that. And I guess I'm going to stick to this question, though, is like, where did that ill intent come in then, right? What was the ill intent of the scalar energy use with regards to the pyramid that made it, quote unquote, demonic?
Okay, if it's my contention, if you look at some pyramids, the pyramids outside of Cairo are a great example. Man did not do that. That's an angelic monument. And I do not believe that the good angels constructed the pyramids outside of Cairo. I believe it's a demonic influence. I believe those are really temples of evil, temples of Satan. And why do I say that? Because if you really look at the geometry and you look at what it draws reference to, there's always occultic symbols. They don't give honor to God or Jesus. Those temples give honor to the occult, to black magic, to the black arts. So you really have to look at the intent. You have to say, well, who's being honored here? It's a temple, as far as I'm concerned. It's not a temple to God.
Hmm. Might have to do more research into that because I'm not. I don't know. I guess it's still.
It's quite. It gets quite involved. If you look at many of these, the way these pyramids were built and what they draw reference to, many of the stars that are aligned that they draw reference to, really it has an occultic meaning to it. Why? Well, I believe it's the occultic arts that are at play here. I believe some of the pyramids were built by fallen angels. That's my comment.
Okay. Hey, I mean, it's an interesting, theory to pursue. I've never looked at it that way. I certainly have seen the interdynamics between the pyramids, the stars, the geometry within them, the way that it has been used for, and they even say that it's been used for like healing their kings and their pharaohs. They would put them in the king's chamber and they would get healed from it. And so, yeah, I mean, I guess they're trying to.
But see, this is what's so telling. Well, if that science exists, then why were we not all part of that? Why is it still esoteric? See, I don't hide my science. I'm trying to give it away. The secrets of antiquity are hidden. It's like a tease. I'm not teasing anybody. I have 15 days of free session on my website. I'm out in the open. I'm transparent.
Gotcha.
I don't tease people. I'm trying to impart this knowledge. There's nothing hidden about me. I'm an open book. I'm not hiding. Whereas you go back in antiquity, and some people, some civilizations, some rulers, they hid the knowledge. Why? To retain power. I'm not hiding anything. So you have to look at the intent. The good tree bears good fruit.
Gotcha. Okay, and maybe that's the corner piece, right? That, like, if I were to bring this up in the future, if I were to say, there might be ill intent with the pyramids, I think that might be the cornerstone piece, right? Is that they only use this for the kings, for the pharaohs, for the people that were in charge to heal them. Everybody else was kind of just by the wayside. It wasn't let's use this for the betterment of all of, humans.
Right.
So,
right.
Oh, but now here's then an interesting kind of point to it, right? There would have been somebody or an angel who would have created it, but could they have actually created it for everybody to use? But then the people who ended up actually only using it were these occultic people, the people in power. They were like, oh, thanks, fallen angel, but now I'm going to actually just use it for myself and we're not going to give it to the people.
That's possible. If you take a really good look, some people say there's Bosnian pyramids, gigantic pyramids in Bosnia. And China apparently has so many pyramids, but the government won't release that.
And Antarctica. They've even found them in Antarctica.
Okay, so if you really look at the labor and the time and the material it would take to build hundreds, thousands of pyramids and then never apply that, what's the point? You're consuming so many resources. It takes so many labor hours to create a pyramid, and then they just sit there. No, to me, it's a big tease. We're being teased. We're being deceived. It's like crop circles. What's the point? Why are you teasing us? Why the artifice? Why the contrivance?
Interesting. So this is also a very interesting thing that you're kind of touching on a little bit here, which I've seen pop up in some of my comments of things I've posted, which is, and it is that people believe that, I guess, aliens as a whole, which I'm very, I think, against labeling like all aliens are bad or all aliens are good. I think there's a healthy mix. It's like humans. Are all humans good or bad? It's like, no, there's a spectrum here. But what you even bring up is interesting because a lot of comments are people who, like, anytime I talk about alien, not anytime, but a lot of the times people think that it is the devil or they're demons or it's not people who are here to help humanity as a whole.
Well, let me just look at UFOs. That's a broad topic. And apparently UFOs have anti-gravity machines. Would you admit to
Oh,
that?
for sure.
And apparently UFOs have captured and mutilated animals. Okay? So they have this understanding of biology. And apparently UFOs have this ability to create unlimited energy. Okay. So why don't we have this gift of anti-gravity if UFOs have it? And if a UFO can capture and mutilate a cattle, then maybe they can perform surgery on people for our benefit. And if UFOs are using this pure, clean energy, scalar energy, plasma energy, what some people call it, why not give us this plasma free energy? What's the point? Why tease us? I'm an open book. My website, I don't tease anybody. Visit the website. I give away free sessions. I don't see UFOs giving us free energy. No, they've been around apparently for hundreds of years. Never once have they imparted any knowledge to us. Do you know of any time that any UFO has ever helped us? Ever? It's always a tease.
So, I mean, in my mind, it's an interesting point. It's a very good point at that as well. I guess the answer that I would rely on, or the one that would come up, is that there are still lessons for us to learn. There is still karma for us to work off, or even if they were to give us this technology, right, we would use it for ill intent because of our lack of consciousness and awareness. Like I think I heard in, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but like you're not selling these machines, are you? Like you're not selling the things for other people to use, right?
Yep. And you're right, because of malevolent intent.
Well, right. Well, yeah. Oh no, not. I thought you were saying your malevolent intent. No, other people might use it for malevolent intent.
Correct. Correct. So I'm going the way of Tesla. I'm willing to work with anybody in the world, but I'm not going to duplicate these instruments. Tesla did not. Hieronymus did not.
Well, but then doesn't this kind of prove the point that I was trying to exuberate or illuminate, which is they don't want to just give it to us, that they want to almost the tease, right? They want to tease us into saying, hey, like look to the stars, look at all this crazy stuff you can't explain. It's almost like this jolt of, hey, like you guys haven't figured it out all out yet. You're not the smartest civilization that has ever come about. And it's this dance of, we can't just come down and give these instruments to you guys because of the consciousness, the frequency, the vibration that we're resonating at isn't ready yet for every single person on earth to have a scalar instrument.
I'll speak about myself. I realized that to manufacture these instruments, and I won't, would be disastrous. People would use it for evil intent. So what do I envision? Well, I want to help people. So I'm going to open up the healing ministry as wide open as I can, have a forum where anybody in the world can submit a photograph to us for free sessions. And I already do that. At least I do that on a limited basis for 15 days. If I ever develop an anti-gravity instrument, well, that's another point. How do I release that to mankind without mankind using that as a weapon of destruction? We're at that tipping point. Somebody in the future is going to develop or redevelop an anti-gravity instrument.
Are there any certain like governors you could place on this? And maybe I'm being a little bit childish in that regards because we're talking about the energy of God.
That's a good point. You can put a governor on electromagnetic energy because it's finite. It's easy to govern. But scalar energy, it's infinite.
Which is interesting, right? Because and so this is kind of where it gets tricky for me, right? Is that you've been able to put two photos together, right? And say whether or not you want to add this to the system or take it away from the system. But yet there's not a limit on what you will allow. Like you can't say no money energy, no physical manipulation of other people, like those governing.
That's against my religious beliefs. I'm not going to use this for greed or for power and control or manipulation. Now, the chakra balancing, I think the chakra balancing is the best I'll ever come up with. It's God's energy, it's God's light entering into our psyche. So to me, the chakra balancing might be the most important thing that I do. It's a blessing from God. It's a realignment.
Right. Well, but so because I'm still trying. I feel like there's something here, but maybe there's not. I don't know. We'll have fun with it. Because you were even saying earlier, whenever you would get into the presence of these machines, if you're in a low
Yes.
frequency, then it would disrupt the machine itself.
Yeah.
So is there not a way, right, to place that catalyst of? I'm sure you might be familiar with Hawkins, Dr. Hawkins. He creates like this higher level of consciousness vibrations where shame, fear, guilt are like at the bottom, and then it transcends up to like bliss, enlightenment, joy. It feels to me like there could be, or I guess I want to say should be, but nothing is should be. There could be a way that you would build in this safety valve that if you're operating from a level of fear, shame, guilt, apathy, those lower frequencies, that it just doesn't work and it turns off.
I'll speak from my experience. If I come into the presence of my instrument, it picks up my mood. So what do I do when I start treating people? I kneel down and I pray all the time, every time, without exception, so that I now have a connection, a healing connection with the instrument. And if I'm going to be a part of the healing, then I have to be in that state of grace, and I have to pray for the healing of the people. And that's what I do on a daily basis. I this instrument is so strong, so subtle. Many times when there's a very strong thunderstorm, lightning is really caused by scalar energy. My instrument will give off miniature lightning strikes, lightning bolts during a electrical storm, which is really a scalar energy discharge. So my instrument communicates with a thunderhead, communicates with the scalar energy in the atmosphere.
Mm.
That's how sensitive these instruments are. And it shows you the consciousness. The consciousness of a thunderstorm, a thundercloud, communicates with my instrument.
And you know that it communicates just by those electrical discharges?
Yes, yes. And many times when there's a lightning flash, my instrument will spark because the lightning travels to my instrument and gives it a surge of energy.
Interesting.
You know,
Does that then protect you or the area of the lightning strike itself?
I think it does. I think it does. Anytime I've had these instruments on, I don't see violent lightning strikes anywhere near me or the laboratory.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And they're just always on then?
Yes, they are.
Just always on.
Yeah.
That's so wild. Something
My laboratories have built up a force field, a scalar energy force field, and it's like a continuous blessing from God. Some people pray continuously, some people use holy water. My instruments are a continuous blessing from God. It's divine energy.
Well, that's interesting then, right? And I think this embodies the title of the podcast really well, of traveling to consciousness. Are we able to just use our own mind? And I think this ties in some of Dr. Joe Dispenza's work. Can we just use our own mind to achieve everything that we've just been talking about here, from
Yes.
invisibility to teleportation to healing HIV to aligning our frequency, aligning our chakras? Are we not able to just do that with our mind then?
We are, but we haven't trained ourselves. I'm going to say the human mind, the brain, and the heart are scalar energy vessels. And everybody has a mind and a heart, and everybody's capable of scalar energy function. We all are scalar energy beings. And we have to realize that. We have to grasp that notion. So I would encourage people to think well and to act well and to emote, if you will. The way we think, the way we feel is the world that we inherit.
Amen on that. And so then I'm also thinking, in regards to this, you were saying that when you turn on your machine for people, that they feel better.
Yes.
The way that I'm kind of visualizing it, though, is that if you have a person who is sick, ill, and maybe not even physically, but just mentally, right? I know in my life, whenever I've made pivots or changes, they've been super uncomfortable. Like if I need to set a boundary, or if I need to, start setting boundaries, is probably the big one. We'll just go with that. If I need to set a boundary that I'm not usually setting, it's super uncomfortable for me to do. So whenever it comes down to the scalar energy, and it's just kind of beaming in this energy, do people ever like maybe get sick from it or feel
No,
off because there's this like disposition between them and this energy?
no, I've never experienced that. If anything, in the first few days, people are elated and people feel better.
Okay.
People see a shift. They see a shift.
It's a positive, like enlightened, aligned shift.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's kind of, I guess, what I'm hinting at, right? Is that if like to shift into more alignment, sometimes that can be uncomfortable. But with this, that doesn't happen.
It doesn't, let me put it this way, it doesn't produce any type of allergy reaction, biochemical reaction. Is it cathartic? Yes, for some people, they've said it has been cathartic. Many people, after the chakra balancing, have said that they revisited suppressed emotions.
Mm.
That scalar energy brought up a suppressed emotion, and they, in some way, they've been able to come to terms with that suppressed emotion. So, whether it's good emotion or bad, whether it was a favorable outcome in the past or something unfavorable, they at least come to terms with it. It provides clarity. Clarity.
Which is huge.
Yes, it is. Yeah. So we're still dealing with reality, clarity. Whether it's good or bad, whether it was a favorable event or an unfavorable, people still say, yes, I come to terms with that. And then, as the saying goes, then they move on. Then they have a better sense of awareness and they can move on. They can move past it, move on.
I guess it's probably what we're all striving for at some level or not, to try to progress.
I love your slogan, traveling to consciousness. You're absolutely right. If we get past this physical limitation, the physical world is real, but it's not the end result, and it's not the prime mover. The prime mover is the non-physical, which are the instructions.
Mm.
You know, what really impresses me about computer engineering is our intelligence, our creativity produces the program that produces the eventual outcome. Well, a spreadsheet is a spreadsheet. Um, Computer aided design is wonderful, but I'm not necessarily looking at the end result, which is a brochure or a mathematical computation. I'm looking at the intelligence behind that. It's the non-physical intelligence behind computer engineering that fascinates me.
Right. Yeah, and here's something that was, as you were kind of talking about my podcast, that kind of popped into my head. Very frequently in the discussion with businesses or with really businesses in general, is you're taught to view it as its own entity, right? As if it's its own person. You need to nourish it. You need to feed it money. You need to, cultivate things around it in order to, have a prosperous business. With this being said, have you ever could I give you a picture of the logo traveling to consciousness? You put it into one of these devices and it like aligns the energetic frequency of my business.
I think that'd be appropriate. If it's God's energy, God's intelligence, that's just a blessing upon you and your business. So some people have done that. Some people send me photographs, say, of a car that they just purchased. They want a blessing. They want some type of protection on their car.
Mm.
I've received photographs of newly purchased cars. Some people want a blessing on their home. They'll send me a photograph of their home. These are inanimate objects, but they still want that protection or that blessing. And I'm all for that. This is, I think, the prudent use of this energy, this light, and we always want to use God's blessing to the highest degree.
Am I able to open up another 15-day trial with you for my podcast?
Sure, of course. I'm going to tell the audience our website, scalarlight.com. Visit the website. Anybody in the world, you email us a photograph. I will work with anybody in the world in order to introduce this. Scalarlight.com. Tell your family and friends. Send us your photographs.
Yeah, I think you sent me the link, so I'll definitely throw that down in the show notes below.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I don't really have anything else for you. I usually give this time to my guests. If you want to encourage people, you can promote your stuff, which we've been kind of doing throughout the whole thing. But again, the show notes are going to be down there. So, use this time to just speak to the audience, speak from your heart. And yeah, the floor is yours.
I want to speak to the audience in this one simple vein. let's welcome this gift from God. Technology is a gift from God. Used appropriately, scalar energy, scalar light technology will help us immeasurably. It will solve problems. So first and foremost, pray upon this. See if this is what God is asking you to do. And if so, then at least promulgate this new science. Tell people about it. If you're so inclined, go to the website, sign up, send us your photograph. We'll treat you for 15 days. We'll balance your chakras. We'll identify microorganisms, harmful microbes, and destroy them. And then you decide. I leave everything up to the people, which is the way it should be. And this is a grassroots movement. So I don't want to dictate the tempo here. I want people to get involved. So please get involved. Help us. This is all grassroots.
I love that you say that. You said something in there that resonates with me to my core, which is just to leave it up to the people. I try to embody that energy so much in the podcast and any content I create, which is I'm just going to present you the information that I've found. I'm going to present you with the stuff that I found, and it's take it or leave it. It's up to you if you want to take this into your reality or you want to leave it at the door. So I love that you said that.
Yeah, thank you.
Guys, Tom Paladino, go check out his stuff. Go check out his website. I mean, it's 15 days free. You don't have anything else to lose. I tried it out for a bit and I'm inconclusive on my test results just because I don't know. It's a long story. I had a couple things. I tried doing a different like grounding mat, and then I tried a couple different things in one day. So it's not an exclusive test. I do feel better though. So I will say that my quality of life has improved in the last 15 days. But that is for an entirely new episode on its own. Honestly, I might do a side episode, like a little mini off series to actually kind of dive into that a little bit deeper. But that is all the time that we have for today. So guys, I appreciate you all, and I will see you guys in the 6th dimension.